Most people examine NDEs only up to the point where they reach this transition, this light. Very few have actually analyzed what happens after the light. Who did they speak to? What are these entities? When you start collecting cases one by one, it turns out there's a lot of confusion. It's unclear who to trust. Everyone speaks with such certainty, but is it really true? There's no reliability here at all, because we lose repeatability. The stories begin to diverge. Typically, people say they were contacted by some kind of voice. At first, it speaks to them, and then it shifts into telepathy. At that moment, they somehow know whose voice it is. A grandfather, a friend, a so-called spiritual guide, or even God. But this is pure madness, and it gets even stranger. Many describe that suffering is somehow necessary, that these entities seek suffering in our earthly world. They say people choose lives filled with pain and hardship in order to get closer to God. In fact, the theme of suffering runs like a red thread through our world. So if we ask ourselves, to what extent can these otherworldly forces influence our reality? What level of control do they have over us? As we've seen in previous episodes, they can move objects, make them disappear and reappear, and even alter our memory. The so-called Mandela effect, when we forget things or remember them at just the right moment. People report slipping into some kind of alternate reality, where familiar things are suddenly different or swapped. We still need to examine these cases in detail. We already have them in our database. For example, another interesting phenomenon is what could be called escape from inevitable death. When a person remembers being in mortal danger, for instance drowning far from shore, and in the next moment they're standing safely on land. Or when someone describes a car bumper about to hit their head, and the next instant they're calmly having lunch in their kitchen. People sometimes describe quite bizarre cases, the kind that would be hard to invent even if you tried. From everything we've discussed, one could conclude that these forces have total control over our civilization, one way or another. So what would be the next logical step in this line of reasoning? If we look at today's world from this perspective, specifically at the leadership of governments and international organizations, at what's happening globally, and then compare it with the level of violence in the world, we arrive at a picture that seems most beneficial to these controlling forces. It suggests that all this violence serves their interests, and this aligns with the accounts of people who have experienced NDEs, who often say that suffering is necessary for the growth of the soul. So it turns out like this. If we place on one side of the scale a person dying from hunger, disease, and unsanitary conditions, and on the other side the President of the United States.
You mean the President of the United States lives well?
Well, he grew up in wealth and has never really been in need, and he also holds power. But according to what they say about the other side, none of that matters there. What matters is being closer to God.
That's interesting. So it turns out that God is love, but to get closer to Him, you have to suffer.
Exactly. But here's what makes me think. What if we consider what kind of lessons such suffering could actually teach? When a person lives in poverty, illness, grief, and suffers their entire life, what does that lead to? Obedience? What they definitely get is psychological trauma. It's essentially the accumulation of permanent psychological damage. A person who goes through that will never see the world the same way as others. For example, if you take a child from a poor family who constantly suffered and endured different forms of abuse and place them into a wealthy, stable family, their behavior will change. They won't perceive values the same way. Their mindset will be different. Say a person has been starving and suddenly finds themselves at a lavish banquet of millionaires where tables are overflowing with food. What will they do? Rush at the food? How will they behave?
So it turns out that if a person hasn't been loved for a long time, they will crave that love even more. How does that work? To draw conclusions like that, we still don't have enough data for proper analysis.
There's a very strange pattern forming here, as if we keep missing a key element of the whole system. Think about the bloody sacrifices in ancient Mexico, where they had rituals of tearing out hearts, or the blood sacrifices in Mesopotamia, or those still practiced across parts of Africa in shamanic rituals, where a chicken is sacrificed, its head cut off, and people cover themselves in blood.
That immediately reminds me of the Old Testament, where they sacrificed hundreds of lambs and bulls on altars to Yahweh.
And Christianity itself, at its core, is built on this idea, where essentially, God sacrificed his own son. He could have changed reality, he could have avoided it. And we know that Jesus asked God for this in the Garden of Gethsemane. It seems that the sacrifice must be bloody, that it must involve suffering and pain. According to NDE witnesses, this is how the soul raises its vibrations and moves closer to God.
By the way, in Christianity there were also practices of self-torture. Monks making whips with hooks and flagellating themselves. It reminds me of Stockholm Syndrome, a world of souls with various PTSD-like conditions, centered around a God who craves blood and suffering, and Earth as some kind of torture chamber or prison cell. All people who experienced NDEs talk about boundless love there, saying they are ready to serve God and move closer to Him. But if God is love, and if we ourselves are a part of God, would He really subject us to such trials?
Maybe all of this is just nonsense. Screen memories, confabulations, deception, simply put, brainwashing, or some kind of reprogramming of consciousness. But what's interesting is that they don't force, they persuade. Why would they need that? If they could simply compel us, why construct such a complex system of false hallucinations? So it leads to this conclusion. It becomes clearer why we may never be able to build an ideal society on Earth, and why there will never be lasting peace. If these external forces constantly require suffering, pain, and torment, then wars, injustice, poverty, disease, and all the rest will never disappear. And therefore, all earthly leaders are either under their control or serve their interest.
That sounds logical.
Do we have any account that clearly describes contact with these entities on the other side? We need it to understand the motivation and meaning of what is happening.
There is an interesting case. It happened to a 20-year-old girl in 2000 during a near-death experience.
We need the part describing what happened after the person entered the other world.
This is a continuation of the story we started discussing last time.
I ended up in this kind of space where there was nothing. Just a group of beings who were like overseeing me. When you're there, you feel so much more real, because apparently that's the real world, so to speak, in a different format. And when I found myself there, I was of course in complete shock. They were calming me down. It took me a while to come to my senses, because I guess some old energies from the virtual world were still lingering. Then they calmed me down and said, "Just wait a little, some time will pass here soon." Although there's no such thing as time there, well, there's something, I guess. And supposedly, you'll return to your old, real state and will be able to communicate normally. A bit later, I actually felt like I could talk to everyone normally, without any of those negative remarks like, "Who are you people?" and so on. I calmed down and started to remember. And by the way, I was surprised then that I wasn't saying anything, but they were responding to my thoughts. Like, everything I was thinking, everyone could hear. I was surprised. How can you hear me? I didn't say anything. They said, "Here, everyone communicates telepathically, relax." There isn't really a specific definition of your gender there. I think everyone's the same gender there. And I had some other name, I can't remember it, and they explained that I had been immersed in some kind of simulation. They called it something else I don't remember. Like the Matrix. Honestly, it's really hard for me to articulate this story in some parts because our human language doesn't have the terms they used. And yet I understood them perfectly. Anyway, they calmed me down a bit. Why was I getting so angry at them? I remember I was really yelling at them. "What do you mean? What simulation? What's the point? You deceived me," and so on. I had this really intense negative reaction, almost to the point of tears. It was this state of profound shock. Why was that? Because at that time, I was around 20 years old, and I had already lived a very hard life, compared to others. I'd had so many life or death situations, really dangerous ones. I'd been through a lot. My friends, who saw all of this, had the feeling I'd lived several lifetimes. So my reaction was this shock. What do you mean? I went through all that, I thought it was all real. I had so many traumas, so much happened. And now I find out none of it was real? Well, then they somehow. I had this feeling they were influencing me with some kind of energy, helping me get through that shock, to accept that truth calmly. They waited. I remember they were laughing, and that annoyed me more than anything. Here I am feeling so awful, and they're laughing. I said, "What are you laughing at? It's not funny at all. You know there were kids and this and that." And they made me understand that those kids I was talking about, like it wasn't real, in a sense. Or maybe it was just part of the story, just for me, virtually, that kids got sick, suffered, something happened to them. It's hard to explain what they meant, actually. But I understood it as, "Why are you so worried? We told you you're in a game. So all the rest of it doesn't really matter, it's not worth worrying about because, like, it didn't actually happen." I don't know how to take that, but that was the gist of it. Then I remember this process took quite a while, me yelling, asking them questions. How can this be? I was demanding proof that it wasn't real, that I'd been immersed in some simulation. And I remember they showed me, proved it to me somehow. During that telepathic communication, there were images. They would send me thought images and I would sort of see them, watch them. It's really hard to describe that process now because, like I said, our human consciousness is so limited, it doesn't allow us to convey everything exactly as it was. Later, when I calmed down, I looked at them. There were two tall beings. The energy felt more masculine and they looked like some kind of alien entities. But they had slightly glowing bodies. Not fully glowing, but I could see energy moving through them like little bluish sparks. They looked very similar to some modern-day robots, but they weren't robots, I don't know. It's hard to describe. Alien entities, rather. They were much taller than an average human. There were two of them, and they called themselves my guides, my teachers. Then they introduced me to my group of architects. These were beings, I understood, from another civilization. They all belonged to different civilizations, you could tell by their appearance and by their functions. Their roles were specialized. They introduced me and said there were 12 of them. I looked at them, they were shorter. They were a group, they walked past me, not right past me but at a distance. They didn't talk to me, just greeted me and walked by, talking among themselves. They were in the middle of discussing either my Matrix project or maybe they were guiding someone else, I don't know. But I had the feeling this was my group, the ones writing my program, writing the events. After that, they introduced me to the keeper, who was a completely different type. While the others, for example, were on 2 legs, with 2 arms, kind of elongated with long fingers, like we're shown, a bit similar, the keeper was nothing like that. Actually, those architects looked just like the standard alien, like the ones we see in drawings everywhere. But the keeper was completely different, didn't resemble a human form at all. I don't know how many legs it had, or if it even had arms, it was unclear. When I watched the movie The Fifth Element, there were these creatures, clumsy, big, bulky, it looked exactly like that, In that movie too, you couldn't really tell where their arms or legs were. I'd have to look at those creatures again, it was very similar. That the space we were in had nothing around it. It felt like we were just in some kind of suspended state. I don't remember there being any furniture or any other equipment. The only thing I remember, when my teachers were instructing me, there was something like a board that you write on or draw on. But of course it wasn't like a regular board, maybe it was quantum, electronic. I don't know, but there was something like that. Some kind of device. The keeper showed me this thing. He communicated telepathically that inside this device was our energy, the energy of the people in our group. But visually, there weren't that many. It was a small installation, I can't say it stored every single soul for the whole planet, no. I don't remember exactly how many there were, but maybe around 200. It was a device about the size of, I think, a little smaller than a car, with many cells all over its surface. These cells were hexagonal and covered with this shimmering film, with different colors of very thin film. And he communicated telepathically that the souls were resting there, recovering. They come back, we immerse them there, and they rest, they are stored, and I watch over them and care for them. And then he showed me empty cells, without that film on the surface, and communicated that it hurt him very much, that he was very upset that those souls were not here, in their place. I remember that very clearly, but I don't remember why. Supposedly they didn't return, maybe they got lost, maybe they were stolen, maybe taken away. I honestly don't remember. But I remember that he had such pain in his soul because he couldn't place them back there, they were lost somewhere. After I met them all, talked with them, interacted a bit, I said, "Wow guys, you're kind of scary looking." They burst out laughing, I remember. And by the way, throughout my entire time there, what struck me was this light, amazing feeling overall. Such great, wonderful energies. We don't have anything like that here. That warmth of love, I don't know. And most of all, the humor. But it's not like our humor, it's the energy of humor, light humor, very subtle. And I couldn't understand it at first. They joked from the very beginning, but my human consciousness, when I first got there, was annoyed because I didn't understand the humor at all. It was absolutely incomprehensible, it really irritated me. Then later, they told me, "Don't worry, you'll get used to these energies soon, and you'll become yourself again, and then you'll understand our humor, you'll find it funny too, you'll laugh with us." And that's exactly what happened. I remember that inner joy, thinking, yes, the humor is wonderful, so light, so easy. It was great, just really great, in those energies. So when I told them, "Well guys, you're quite something," I said, I kind of pictured it differently, because we're shown and told that people there are in beautiful clothes and all that. But this is totally different. That keeper is actually kind of creepy. They had no clothes on, they had at most something like a tight-fitting, shimmering suit, maybe a spacesuit. I don't know, maybe that was their body, or maybe it was a suit, I didn't ask. Back to the story. We started talking, having a conversation. I said, "So what happens now?" And by the way, when I laughed and said, "Well, you guys are quite something," I remember their response well. They said, "Yeah, you're laughing. You think you're any prettier?" I was surprised. "What do you mean? Did I look different somehow?" Not how I looked there. No, of course not. And I was so afraid to look at myself. I don't know what I looked like, I wasn't really interested for some reason, I didn't care. But I clearly understood I didn't look any better than them. Our conversation went on for a long time. The essence of it was that we started analyzing my entire life. They showed me, using thought forms, certain situations from my life, and we broke them down. They told me what I did right, what I did wrong, what I could have done differently, made a different choice, and so on. We could easily go back, basically be right there in that place, in that situation. I don't remember how that worked, they were in control of that process, so I don't know the technicalities, we wouldn't understand anyway. The point is, whenever I wanted, we could instantly transport ourselves right there and observe the whole situation from the outside. And we watched how everything was, how it all happened. And, interestingly, many situations in my life, they revealed to me things I didn't know. Things that specifically involved me. I was so surprised. Wow, I see, so that's how it was, and I thought it was like this. It was interesting, like watching a movie. But it took quite a while, and I'll repeat, there's no such thing as time there. So, no time, and no particular space either, you're just somewhere, in a place with nothing. And I remember my question. You're telling me that this whole thing was like a computer game, right? Like the Matrix, something hard to explain. But tell me, we dust, even just the stupid dust at home that accumulates, I can see it. Are you telling me you draw all that? You create all that? What's the point? They said, well, that's the design, it has to be that way. I said, so all that dirt on the roads in the city, you draw all that? Yes, we draw all of that, it's a lot of work. I said, well guys, you did a great job to think of all that, to render it so detailed, it's impressive. Then I asked, what's the idea actually? What's the point of all this? I don't understand. They told me that, like, while being immersed, being in this matrix, an entity accumulates certain energies that raise the general vibration level of the planet or something. From what I understand, there isn't even really a planet, just some kind of space and level, and all these planets are also just the same matrix. I don't remember this part. I remember asking questions and they said, ask any questions, absolutely any, nothing is off limits for you. I was surprised. Is that allowed? He said yes, it's allowed, and laughed. But don't expect to keep this information, we'll erase it all. I said, well, okay, let's do it. I'll ask questions, you'll answer? Yes, of course, go ahead. And then he said, why do you need this? You're not going to take this information out of here anyway, you simply won't be able to. I said, I'm not planning on going back anywhere, I'm staying here. Wait, don't jump to conclusions. We'll work with you now, show you everything that happened, analyze it, do an evaluation and so on, and then we'll talk. So we watched that movie about myself, reviewed it, analyzed what was and what wasn't. There were some moments that were very, very sad, upsetting, I don't know, shameful. They said to me they sensed how ashamed I was, how I was struggling. Calm down, please, calm down, this all passes. You were immersed in human life, so everyone makes mistakes, everyone acts differently, it's fine, we understand. They calmed me down. You see, they said, these are all minor things, your actions in life, the not so great ones, just mischief. We'll analyze it, talk about it, and that's it. When all that analysis was over, they said, well, are you ready to go back? I said, listen, no, I don't want to. There, you have to walk around, do things, it all seems pointless somehow. I'm not really sure what it's all for. I feel better here, it's great here, we communicate telepathically. What I liked about it was that you can't lie there. It's simply impossible. I hate lies, I've hated them since I was a child, I can't stand them, I always sense them. There, it's impossible. And I really, really loved that. I also loved that there was no physical body there. I didn't have one at that moment. They had bodies though, just some kind of light body. I was just a kind of energy cluster, I guess, I hadn't been immersed into a new avatar yet. Anyway, they said, wait, don't make any decisions. We'll show you the program. Well, what will happen after, let's say, if you don't go back, i.e. you die in the Matrix, in the game? You'll see what the consequences are and you can make your decision based on that. So they showed me this sort of short film. There I am, dying, my funeral, my loved ones grieving my death. My first husband at the time, he completely loses it. Because of my death, he loved me very much, he just snaps. Starts doing all sorts of crazy things that lead to very bad consequences. Some kind of butterfly effect. Like a wave spreading out from a falling droplet, it changes all the events drastically. My departure had a huge impact, leading to negative events, so to speak, that lower the vibration of the space, or the vibrations of the entities immersed in avatars. I don't know, I don't remember. So I watched it, looked at them, and I laughed, I remember that. I said, I get it, it was all calculated. So you showed me this film, and you were absolutely 100% sure I'd go back, that it would be my own decision, that I couldn't do otherwise after seeing this. They laughed too. Well yeah, we were always sure of you, we know you well. Apparently we've been working together for a very long time. Like you're a valuable asset. We know you're the feisty type, and we were 100% sure you'd make that choice. I said, well, here we go again. Now I'm going back to some pointless life and I have no idea what it's for or what I'm supposed to do there. At least, I said, I've had such a hard life since childhood, I've been through so much. We know, we wrote it all for you. Well, of course. Who else? It was intense, definitely. In terms of, well, you get it. Don't worry, they said. We'll immerse you back. You'll go back, of course, without any of the information you got here, since you asked absolutely everything. They laughed. What do you need it for anyway? Why do you need to know? Tell me how to perform heart surgery, I asked. They laughed. But why do you need that? You don't need that at all. Well, please, tell me. Of course. And so, by my estimate, since time doesn't exist there, it was about 2 weeks that I was asking them questions. Learning. And they didn't. You'll have this all blocked anyway. Well, I still want to know, I'm so curious. Yeah? You are. You are that way. There they related to me as genderless, I think. I remember that I was with them, and they said, we need to give you some training. But you're gonna block it anyway? Well, that's different, we need you to understand. You'll go back with this lack of knowledge. But they didn't say why this knowledge was necessary at all. Why didn't they block it? So the training happened. The two of them stood by this board, they worked in a pair, they worked together, they were very coordinated, these teachers. And the main thing I understood was that they were showing me things in the air, showing me in 3D, using their hands to do it like a thought form. They showed me. Look, they said, there is a system, a hierarchical system of planets, and our task is to raise the vibration. Everyone's talking about this on every corner now, but back then I hadn't even heard of it, no one was talking about it. You see, they said, a shift needs to happen now, a shift in all systems. From the bottom there needs to be a rise in vibration that will push the next level upward, meaning we will move to a new level. Absolutely everything depends on this. It has to happen, and you are working toward this. So all those problems I went through in my life were like my work. Yeah, that's it. Listen, I said, but working like that you can't keep going non-stop. I need to rest sometimes too. At least give me something pleasant in my life so I can recharge. That's not how it works. Don't worry, we oversee you, we're always with you, we monitor your condition, you don't need to worry about that. When I was there, when they were communicating with me, I felt this amazing, incredible positive energy. But over time, I get this feeling like I'm a battery for someone, like I'm being used. Maybe I'm wrong, of course, because I don't remember. Maybe I get something, some benefit for this work. Maybe we have some contract with them, but honestly, I don't know the terms yet. Maybe I'll level up. When I return after this work, I'll be at a different level, which will be a bonus. I don't remember them telling me that. Maybe they did, but it was blocked. So today, I have this feeling that I'm in some kind of slavery, like a battery. Well, I hope I'm wrong. Another thing I almost forgot to mention, that I work 24 hours a day. What I mean is, my brain, my consciousness never switches off. Practically never. I am conscious even in my sleep, and I am constantly working. The work consists of, I have this endless analysis going on. Sometimes I get so tired of my own thoughts. I have these thoughts, and at the same time, it's like I'm living in multiple worlds. I have one job in my sleep, another job here, and somewhere else in parallel. I don't know if I should call it a space or just working with knowledge. I live an ordinary life, like an ordinary woman. I'm immersed here in being a woman, performing all the functions I'm supposed to. I pretend I'm normal like everyone else. I try not to stand out, to blend in with the crowd. Why? Because I've noticed that if I stick my neck out even a little, the hunt begins. So I try to do my work very quietly, and of course because of this, I sometimes get very tired. Back to that story. So they already knew then that I would of course agree to the second immersion, to going back, so that nothing bad would happen. And now I'm thinking, it's very strange. If, as they say, they write the events, they write my matrix, then what bad events could happen because of my absence? Something doesn't add up. Write good events then if you write the matrix, or write them for someone else. But from this we can conclude that they only wrote my program. So it turns out that every person, if they are a person, it's unclear who's who here, in the form of a human so to speak, in a human avatar, each has their own group and they write for each character, let's say, their tasks, their matrix, and their events. That's how it seems. But anyway, we agreed. And I remember my own phrase, I said that this immersion in this matrix, in terms of time, it seems to us that 50-70 years is a lot, it's a long time. But actually from the perspective of that consciousness, I remember that it's like, literally by their perception it's just an instant. So it's actually not such a long game, it's very quick. And I asked them, so how much longer will I need to be there, how long will you immerse me for? I hope not too long. I remember they told me 73. That's the maximum age apparently. So I have about 30 more years to go. I remember what I said. Well, if it's just an instant anyway, and living those 50 years. Okay, I agree. Life is endless anyway, there's no end at all, we're immortal. Alright, let's play some more. With that, my time there ended. They gave me some parting words, I remember. It was a very long process. I was there, well, exactly 2 or 3 weeks by our perception, and I talked with all of them. I didn't talk with the architects actually, just with those 2 guides, the teachers. And then they said goodbye, saying, "Alright, we've prepared a great game, a program for you, time to immerse." And I remember this interesting moment. It's really interesting that Keeper comes up to me, the clumsy one from the 5th element, the one whose DNA they took. He comes up to me, and from him extend 2 things like whiskers, I don't know, some kind of channels, but like tubes. And they pierce into me, and I see through these tubes movement. They're transparent, basically, sort of translucent, unclear. And energy is moving inside, and you can see it all, you watch. And I look at these tubes that have entered me, and I can see some energy flowing through them. Little multicolored sparks, a lot, really a lot. I felt it physically, like I was being pumped with something. But I didn't feel bad, but there was this intense pressure, like, I don't know, force feeding, I don't know how to explain it. I felt this very strong tension in the body that, by the way, I didn't have before, that light body, I don't know. And it went on for quite a while, and I remember being exhausted, it went on, and they were like, "Wait, it's almost over, wait." I remember how this Keeper was transmitting with such effort, pumping me full of this powerful energy, and I almost felt nauseous. I said, "Alright, enough, remove those things, let's finish. And he withdrew those whiskers. I felt immediate relief, but I felt this kind of weakness. And they were like, "There." And I remember being so curious about what they had just done to me that I don't remember if I asked what it was and they said, "We're closing this information," or if I wasn't even able to ask what it was. I'm still curious about it, I'm bursting with curiosity about what that was. I can guess, for example, that they uploaded some information into me. Or the second option. I lost a lot of energy, for instance, to be immersed I needed a certain type of energy. I don't know, I can't decide. No matter how many requests I've made, I've reached out to them to give me an answer and they're silent, just went quiet, they don't answer. And that's it, and then, I don't remember how after this I found myself back in my body. I remember that when leaving and when entering there was a sound, a piercing noise in my ears, very intense, like a whistling or a humming both together and then a pop. When I left there was also a hum and a pop, or maybe the pop first, but there was something like that. A buzzing, ringing, some kind of vibration. It's hard to describe that sound, but it's unpleasant, kind of overwhelming. And then, I was in my body. I opened my eyes. But death had already been declared. There was no one around me, the operating room was empty. I don't know how many minutes had passed. I calmly got up, quietly stood, walked out of the operating room. There were some nurses in the corridor, I think. I knew exactly where the doctor was because, actually, while we were communicating, while I was there all that time, I was kind of monitoring what was happening in the matrix, so to speak. I don't know why, but I could. I could periodically freeze things when I needed to concentrate on something else while I was there, and then I could return here and observe what was happening. Like, rewind, I don't know, put it on pause, then play and see what happened next. And at the moment the doctor declared death, they had been arguing, really arguing. "You're to blame, no, you're to blame." They called a team that was supposed to do resuscitation, but they didn't make it in time. They didn't even resuscitate me because all my blood had drained out, they had damaged an artery. All my blood just drained out and my heart stopped because of it. And then they see me. And then the craziness started, of course. Absolutely insane craziness. So when I stepped back into our space, I had this ability to switch into another state where you see energies. You don't see matter, you only see the energies that matter is made of, and how those energies move. In truth, everything alive, it moves, energy circulates. So for example, you look at a tree with a different kind of gaze. It still has the shape of a tree, sure. But you see these little flickers of light running through it. That's energy. It was so beautiful, just incredibly beautiful. And it felt sad that no one else could see it but me. I understood that I had to stay calm, stay quiet. No one should notice that anything was different about me. So I decided that until I adapted to these new energies, I needed to keep my composure. and conserve my energy. I didn't talk to anyone about any of this, of course. I decided to just keep it to myself. Thought back then I was riding minibuses, using public transportation. I remember the shock I felt the first time I got on a minibus after all of this. It was like a swarm of bees, or flies, I don't know. I started hearing this buzzing in my ears because I realized I could hear so many people at once. But when I looked at them, I saw they were all silent, staring at me. Maybe I was acting strange, I don't know. But I understood those were their thoughts. So I discovered I could hear what people were thinking. I tried to focus on one or two people's thoughts, and I realized it was all just nonsense. Really nothing worth listening to. Just trivial stuff like, what should I buy? And then she told me. She said, that kind of thing. It was so overwhelming I barely made it to my stop, I just jumped off. So little by little I started uncovering these abilities within myself. Then something else interesting happened. I had this ability where I could see certain events, like a vase falling and shattering, something like that, a few seconds before they happened. I would see it, and then moments later, literally just a few seconds, it would actually happen. I was, of course, absolutely astonished, and at the same time, I was confused, scared, but also incredibly overjoyed because it was so amazing, right? Like, how is this even possible? And I'd think to myself, how many more things will show up? After that, all the electronics started acting up. Computers would break down, kettles would turn on by themselves, TVs would switch on. I also remembered another strange thing. When you're walking down the street past someone's house, for instance, and you look through the window, well, obviously people live there. You look in and you already know everything about those people, their life. You know how they live, what they're about, what problems they have, for example, and it's like, you want to help everyone, but you realize you don't have enough energy to help everyone. That's the first thing. The second thing, I kept asking myself, should I help everyone? Because evolution is about people developing on their own, not shifting the responsibility for solving their problems, whether with health or anything else, onto someone else. Evolution is about each person reflecting on the root cause of their issue and starting to search for what can help them. That's what evolution is, expansion. But if someone else solves all their problems for them, basically, they'll just sit on your neck and put all the responsibility on you. So this was really hard for me, knowing, say, what someone's problem was, but not stepping in to solve it. I could talk to them about it, ask a few questions, and I'd always ask, why don't you want to solve this? And when I saw that the person just, well, everyone's different. Some find it easier to leave things as they are, some lack the strength, some don't believe in themselves, and so on. Everyone has their reasons. I decided not to force anything. So for a while, I just observed. I observed my own state, observed what was happening around me. I was getting used to things, adapting. Because it's like being an astronaut who spent a long time in zero gravity and kind of forgotten how to walk. That was me. I was getting used to these energies. I'd walk around thinking, God, everything is so harsh, everything is so rough. But there was one thing I loved. I remember when I came back, I was in awe of this space, of the beauty that was created. I was just so amazed by the craftsmanship, by the intricacy of every detail. I was in awe of the beauty of nature, the energies. I often visited beautiful places, nature of course, forests, rivers. It mesmerized me. I could stay in such places forever. And I had this feeling that I could talk to all of it, interact with it. Because I still remembered what they told me, that everything around you, it's all part of you. Like yes, it's created, but it's a shared energy, you can't separate it. I started looking at myself differently from how people usually look at themselves. Doesn't matter if it's a woman or a man. They often judge themselves harshly, wanting to change something, dissatisfied with something because it doesn't fit some generally accepted standard of beauty. But I started seeing myself in a completely different way. From the perspective that this was created, this was designed. I'd look in the mirror and think, wow, you guys did such a great job. You thought of everything, every little detail, I don't know, a freckle on my body. I'd think, this was all intentional. You're so amazing, you did such an incredible job. And I was so captivated by the color of my eyes, amazed at how they'd matched everything. I'd say, you matched everything so perfectly. The eye color, the hair color, it's all so harmonious. I remember for a while I was in this state. First of all, after I came back, I saw everything differently, visually, and I perceived everything differently. My senses were extremely heightened, and for some time there was no negativity at all. Absolutely no negative thoughts, no negative feelings, nothing. It was as if I just loved everything completely. so much so that I was radiating this energy of love toward everything. I'd gaze at every detail of this world and be astonished by its artistry, because now I understood that all of it was created, woven. And I'd talk to them all the time. It was just incredible. What I saw today was just incredible. You guys are so amazing. I still had some connection to them back then, and I was overflowing with emotion for a long time. I'd burst into tears, for instance, when I'd see a beautiful woman or a handsome man. It didn't matter. I'd look at them like a creator might, marveling at the result of this work. Or if I saw a beautiful tree, I'd cry, tears streaming down my face, thinking, wow, this is such incredible beauty. But interestingly, architecture, the built houses, simple streets, ordinary buildings, I didn't really notice them. They didn't catch my attention. My focus was on natural things, nature, people, souls. Then I started noticing that I could see. It's not that I could see them, but I could feel things, and images would appear in my mind, problems people had, like health issues. But since I still wasn't fully adapted, so to speak, to these new aspects of my perception, I'd ignore it, stay quiet. I just looked, observed, studied it all. I could also see pregnancies at very early stages. Very early, literally as early as 3 days. I could already tell there was a baby. I also remember that after I returned and was still connected to them, I felt that connection very strongly. I talked with them, had a lot of communication, though not like over there, but I could fully sense them, though I couldn't see them. There was no one around me who could support me through these changes. But you have to understand, it's also incredibly hard to go through that. When you see things others don't, and you have no one to share it with, it scares you in a way. Sometimes it feels like you're being pulled out of this reality, and you're not sure where you are anymore. When you no longer vibrate at the same frequency as this reality, the one that's full of negativity, for instance, it becomes incredibly difficult, both mentally and physically, to exist in that space. And so, little by little, I started to lose balance, I guess. I couldn't hold on to those energies anymore, couldn't handle the imbalance. Maybe I should have sought out people who could support me, help me. Maybe I lacked the strength of spirit, I don't know. But in the end, I had a breakdown, a kind of hysteria. I remember covering my head with my hands, burying my face in a pillow, and just screaming, "Take it all away, take it. I don't want any of it, leave me alone, I want this to end, that's it, I can't do this anymore, I can't take it anymore, take back everything you gave me, I don't need it." It felt like a long time passed. I don't even remember it, like I blacked out, shut down. Maybe I fell asleep, I don't know, I don't remember. And then when I woke up, the first thought I had was, is it all gone? I didn't even know whether to be happy or not if it was really gone. I remember slowly going outside. I realized I had nothing left. It was like, I don't know. I exhaled. Maybe everything was gone. I was just the same sensitive person I'd always been, the way I was originally designed. I'd always been sensitive, very sensitive. That's why I find this world difficult, because I always feel other people's pain almost as if it were my own. And I always feel this urge to help them in any way I can. That was always there, and it's still there. I do that work. And I remember after I returned and was still in contact with them, I felt that connection very strongly. I talked to them, communicated a lot, not like over there, but I could sense them completely. I just couldn't see them.
You know what especially unsettled me in this story? She talked about the feeling that she was like a battery. For whom? For those entities, and she says she works 24 hours a day. What exactly is her job?
It's a strange matter. They all say that there is neither good nor evil. That's really hard for an ordinary person to understand, someone who faces difficulties every day. What's strange is that they hide a lot from us. Why aren't we allowed to know this? What are they afraid of? Can we even trust such accounts? Or is this simply brainwashing using some kind of informational reprogramming technology? I should note that such technologies do exist in our world. In this way, any kind of disinformation can be implanted. In this matter, we can rely only on statistics and cross-analysis. The more reference points we have, the better we can advance our research. Interestingly, this story resembles classic cases from accounts of alien abductions.
Well, according to abductees, they are simply returned back. but here she, as well as other NDE experiencers, was persuaded to return.
So they didn't fully control the situation. Could those empty cells be hinting at that? Where did those souls go? What can we take specifically from this story? First, that it is somehow connected to energy, second, to control, and third, to some mysterious goal related globally to our planet. What could that be? Let's assume these entities are not foolish and it's entirely predictable what a person will experience going through all these hardships and trials on Earth. What kind of energy would they emit and what kind of energy was needed? The energy of pain, suffering, torment, if, as they claim, neither pain nor suffering exists. We can see what kind of energies prevail on Earth now, and unfortunately these are not energies of love, kindness, and compassion. Chaos on the planet is increasing year by year. From this come wars, suffering, torment, depression, and pain. Even the narrator herself came to the conclusion that she serves as a kind of battery for them and that they tricked her into returning. Who are they and what goals are they really pursuing with their twisted, cynical sense of humor?
It's also worth adding that many people who return from there initially experience a kind of euphoric state, and their critical thinking seems suppressed or switched off. Over time, this begins to fade, and the person returns to their normal state, but the memory remains. We should examine this in detail in the next episode. I have many similar accounts. People say that their souls choose pain themselves.
By the way, these cases where a person seems to forget to turn off telepathy and they hear thoughts are also not rare. The threads here also lead to ufological phenomena. Abductees describe that when they were on a flying saucer, they understood what was happening telepathically. For example, where different groups of grays were and where they were going. There have also been several cases where people, after abduction, retained the ability to read thoughts for a week or two. Interestingly, they describe thought as spreading along the line of sight. Could this be related to the Gray's procedure, when they stare closely into a person's eyes from a short distance?
Yes, possibly, but that's not directly related to our topic. Stay with us. There's still a lot of work ahead.